Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel. And today I'm going to react to a video called My Very Honest Disney Wish Review by, I can't even see that name, but I'll have their channel down below in the description. So let's get to the video.
It's no secret that Disney Cruise Line has been my favorite cruise operator for a while now, and my favorite of the ships, the Disney Fantasy, launched all the way back in 2012. A decade later, the company is finally unveiling their newest addition to the fleet, the Disney Wish. I, of course, had to see what it's like. So I grabbed my two friends, Emmy and Brennan, and we embarked on the second public sailing to find out. In this video, I'm going to lay out what I like and what I didn't like, plus show you all the new things this modern Disney ship has to offer, from a Star Wars bar with a $5,000 drink to the first attraction on a cruise ship. Most importantly though, I'm really finding out if it's all worth the money. This is my brutally honest review of the Disney Wish.
Hey.
It's a beautiful boat.
That's me in the early 2000s. I've been very lucky to have gone on 3 of the formerly 4 ships on Disney Cruise Line. I've really loved what they built here, and it certainly wasn't by accident. The company was formed off the tails of a concluded partnership Disney had with Premier Cruise Lines in the 1980s. They took the concept that they grew together and basically went out on their own, with bespoke ships that stylistically embrace the themes of vintage ocean liners of the 1930s and 40s. It's a gorgeous, timeless design, especially when compared to other ships of the same time period. In 1998, the Disney Magic was launched, then a year later, the Disney Wonder, both embracing design characteristics of Art Deco and Art Nouveau, respectively. They also incorporated a lot of nautical elements that connected the passengers to the actual vessel, like working compasses around the adult pool, nautical charts and other gauges in the special veranda, and pre-9/11, a 2-floor bridge with a walk-around observation deck. And that's just scratching the surface. The ship also had small nooks and crannies for passengers to explore, and a classic-style promenade with a real wooden deck. The ships were exceedingly successful and prompted another set of 2 ships, the Disney Dream and the Disney Fantasy, in 2011 and 2012, respectively. The Disney Fantasy, even to this day, is still probably my favorite cruise product of all time. Can you tell? The Fantasy and the Dream took everything that worked on the Magic and Wonder and just made it bigger and more modern. But they very importantly didn't sacrifice on core design elements that made them special to begin with. The exterior design is just an admittedly worse looking, scaled up version of the older ships, but the interiors are so timeless and shockingly luxurious, with real materials throughout. The Fantasy embraces Art Nouveau with a color palette based around a peacock, and it incorporates the more playful Disney design elements in a very tasteful way. It genuinely feels like a playful, Caribbean-based Disney version of the Queen Mary 2. It all just works so well, and it's why I've paid the extra money to spend my vacation on board so many times now. I truly think the Disney Fantasy, despite it now being a decade old, is still one of the best cruise products out there. So when Disney announced they were building another 2, which would later turn into 3 new ships in 2016, I was pretty hyped. Fast forward to 2022, and here she is, the brand new Disney Wish. So let's take a step on board.
Disney Wish, please welcome the Bryson family.
The moment you walk on board, you can already see that Disney has taken a completely new design philosophy for the ship. Unlike the nautical themes of Art Deco and Art Nouveau on their past ships, the Wish has gone in a completely different direction. According to Imagineers, the primary theme here is enchantment, and it's being treated like a castle at sea. The main selling point of the ship is less of a cohesive experience and more on the individual properties they have aboard it.
The theme of enchantment allows us to do much more extensive Disney storytelling across this vast ship. You can tell princess stories, you can tell Marvel, you can tell Star Wars, you can tell pirate stories.
So that changes everything from the rich, dark wood tones of the 1930s and 40s to a much more modern fairy tale world. They've also completely changed where things are and how it's all spaced out, and trust me, I'll get into that later. From the opening of this video, you'll probably know that I'm biased towards the older look, which evokes a beloved era of design. While what they've done here is lovely in some parts, I don't know how this is really going to age, and I'm not sure if it's all that timeless. But I also understand that I'm somewhat in the minority here. This whole new design language will also carry on to the passenger accommodations, which brings us to the staterooms. I was actually pleasantly surprised by our stateroom, which was a category 4C, a deluxe family ocean view with a veranda. It was very large and well appointed with a comfortable bed and 3 options for additional sleeping areas. Disney thankfully carried over their signature split bathrooms and raised bed for luggage storage. There were plenty of plugs, including the addition of a USB-C, which is very nice, and the refrigerator is finally useful as it pulls out from the drawers. On the not so good side though, the couch was hard as a rock, and the bathrooms no longer have the tile from before, and where it does, it's just a fake panel. And yes, I'm sorry, but I just really don't like the artwork above the bed. Well, I don't mind ours very much, but some of them just look so gaudy to me. The Little Mermaid one in
I like
particular,
it.
I just
I
don't
like
think
it.
blends at all with the color scheme
I
of the
like
room.
it.
Not to
I
mention
like
some of which are from Frozen, which just makes me wonder why
it.
you'd
Let
want
it
a
go.
winter-themed
Let
cabin
it
on a Caribbean
go.
cruise. While the TV is much bigger and has a decent selection of on-demand movies, Disney of course, it doesn't actually swivel. I'd imagine that's really going to hurt the necks of those who are staying in an inside cabin, and unfortunately there's no onboard chiropractor consultation listed on the Navigator. What's also a shame is the elimination of the magic porthole seen on the other ships. On previous vessels, Disney set out to make the inside cabin experience a little bit better, so much so that Royal Caribbean ended up copying them, but now Disney's just eliminated them altogether. Above that category is the ocean view cabins, which are much larger rooms with portholes. Except for this cabin type, they for some reason removed the benches from the larger portholes, so you can't even lie in the windows anymore. Why was that eliminated? Above that are balcony cabins, which are just about the same, with obviously a balcony. Finally, there's concierge, and oh boy, do I have an issue with these. So, Disney Wish is kind of big on concierge cabins, nearly doubling the amount from the previous ships. A new massive lounge was created with 2 forward sun decks and a soaking pool with 2 hot tubs exclusively for those concierge guests. The lowest tier cabin also happens to be my favorite, which is the concierge family ocean view room, which is really cool because it's placed right above the bridge with floor to ceiling windows overlooking the
Hey,
bath.
I like
What's
that.
much less impressive is the category above it, that being the balcony version, which really doesn't seem like a concierge level room at all. The differences are so minor between a regular stateroom and this one. Only this cabin costs thousands of dollars more. On the older ships, I feel like there was much more of an effort to elevate your experience here, to make you feel a lot more special, since again, you are spending thousands of dollars more for this cabin type. The same can be said for the 1-bedroom suite, which I just don't think is very nice, especially compared to its counterpart on the legacy ships. In fact, even the hallways just feel like an afterthought. There isn't much to set it apart from the regular cabin hallways. In fact, one could argue the blank white walls leave it looking more cheap than the normal hallways with wood paneling and wallpaper. The concierge section on the Dream and Fantasy really made it clear where you were, and it looked like money was actually spent on it. Finally, there's the big boy suites, the 1-floor royal suite and the 2-story royal princess suites. Both are extravagant and objectively beautiful, but honestly, who
like it.
cares? I'm not going to sail in that room, and you're most likely not going to, so really, what does it matter? Yes, they're
I like
very beautiful, but they're so unbelievably expensive that even if I did have the money,
Hey, that's why it's called luxury at the end of the day. I know not everyone is meant to do this, but the few that do will enjoy it. Hopefully, I'll be the one.
I really don't see how I can make sense justifying them for a 3-night cruise. But I'll discuss pricing a little later in the video. Finally, and yes, there is one even larger suite than these, there's the Wish Tower Suite. This room is insane as it's inside the ship's forward funnel. It spans 2 decks and encompasses around 2,000 square feet and sleeps 8 people. It's the most luxurious and expensive accommodation on the ship, but it's also the one with the least amount of privacy. See, once the novelty that you're inside a fake smokestack wears off, you'll notice that not only do you have no balcony, but your panoramic windows look directly onto public deck space, which meets at the same height. So unless your blinds are down 24/7, people will look directly into your massive suites. There's even a bar that has high chair seating that looks directly into your room. This completely baffles me, and I don't understand this design and why anyone would pay for this suite. Anyways, the central space inside the ship is called the Grand Hall, and as I mentioned earlier, it's quite different than the previous ships. Actually, it's quite different than anything else at sea right now, and upon first glance, it's quite beautiful. Imagineers have hidden fiber optics throughout the flowing lines up the columns to the ceiling that are not only beautiful, but help accentuate the show scenes, which I'm sure you can tell is taking precedent in this space. Across from the main staircase and replacing what usually would be elevators is a solid wall with a stage and a small outlook. These are used for multiple events, including a welcome show, as well as random character appearances throughout the day. The only issue is that around 80% of the time, there's just a permanent stage structure that isn't being used. When it is, especially the top balcony, the characters are sort of just there and largely being ignored. It's just all a bit awkward. As a whole, though, I think the Grand Hall is nice, but not great. Despite it being white, it actually feels darker for some reason. I'm not sure if it's because there's less windows surrounding it or what. And just above the slightly off Cinderella, there's the guest services desk, which is always packed. Now, it's a brand new ship and not everything is sorted out, but the placement of the desks with no established queue meant that people would line up and block the entrance to the primary staircase. Speaking of staircases, the common spaces around the ship all have this Frozen-esque design to them wherever you went. Pretty tasteful Disney artwork would be seen throughout, and while the ship lacked the magical artwork as seen on the Dream and Fantasy, there was supposed to be an interactive AR game to make up for it, but it apparently wasn't ready for guests while we were on board. Overall, I thought these spaces were pretty nice. The actual design and layout of which is a different story, and like I said, I'll discuss that later in the video. So Disney Cruise Line has always worked on something called rotational dining, having families rotate through 3 different restaurants while their serving staff rotates with them. So each night is a new restaurant. The Wish is no different, with 3 entirely new restaurants. So let's start with the most interesting of all of them.
We can all come together and help for something good.
Worlds of Marvel was our first night of dining, but it really should be called Worlds of Sensory Overload and screens around you everywhere. Throughout your dinner, there's a through-line narrative hosted by Ant-Man and the Wasp. I really couldn't tell you what it's about, but there are some funny moments, followed by utter confusion.
Let me address the elephant in the room. I've heard a lot of chatter out there asking why I didn't shrink down, go in, and kill Thanos in a really creative way. First of all, gross.
Apparently, Ultron, yes, the villain that died in 2015, is back. They must have spent all of their budget on getting Paul Rudd since James Spader is clearly not voicing him once again. But this whole thing is really weird, and it makes me wonder if this dinner experience is made for Marvel fans, then wouldn't that be something they would instantly recognize doesn't make sense in their established lore? Even if you're going to argue this is something that's a one-off and doesn't belong in the Marvel timeline, it's just a weird choice to make with Ultron. The main dinner show film is broken up into a few sections to allow for the courses to be served. But while it isn't on, the screens literally just play a clip show.
Book a getaway with Marriott Bonvoy and discover your personal paradise. Savor a new adventure
Of different Marvel scenes. It's all very distracting and just not a very pleasant atmosphere to be in. Not only can you barely hear the dining staff or each other over everything, but the show goes on for so long that you are literally having to order and interact with your servers while the entertainment is in full force. It's not only incredibly overwhelming, but if someone was genuinely interested in what's going on, they would most likely be forced to miss some of the show scenes. By dessert, there's some base level interactivity by guests, and you defeat Ultron. Ant-Man and the Wasp come out, followed by some surfers literally just showing off large plastic desserts.
Yeah. Let's go,
Oh
go,
my
go.
god.
That's my favorite adventure right there.
Is that canon to the Marvel universe?
As for the actual food, it was also pretty lackluster. The standouts were the steamed bao bun and fried shrimp. The pasta for the entree was actually quite bad, and the lamb shawarma salad was pretty okay. By night 2, we were off to Arendelle, the kingdom from the movie Frozen. This was a dinner show that understandably had me worried, but very surprisingly, it was actually really good. I don't like Frozen at all, but the music they played by their talented entertainment staff really made it quite palatable. I'm not so sure about the emotional show scenes here, but the ending brought the dining room together, and it sort of reminded me of cruise ships of the past with big conga lines. If anything, this entire dining room exploded with energy by the last few songs, and it was actually quite fun. However, they really packed these tables in, and people all the way in the back, I'd imagine, would have a hard time seeing the show. Those people were actually seated near the big panoramic windows at the back of the ship, which sounds great in theory, but they were closed off the entire dinner, probably because this is a dinner restaurant and it was dark outside. I'll come back to this later, but I just have no idea why they put huge windows in the back here when it'll be dark the majority of the time people are actually using the space. Disney does 2 dinners each night, one at 6:15 and one at 8:15. So only the 6:15 dinner during daylight savings time will actually be able to see out the windows. For everyone else, they're just completely useless. I mean, they might as well not be there. Anyways, the standouts for food were the baked scallops, the carrot salad, the sea bass, and the ribeye. Honestly, all of it was pretty great. Finally, there's 1923, the most tame of the 3 dining venues. This was my favorite and reminded me of the older ships, as it operates as the most elegant dining room aboard the Wish. It's pretty clearly Art Deco inspired and has beautiful touches of gold and olive green throughout, with cases of vintage Disney artwork. However, this dining room is themed after Walt Disney in the early age of Hollywood, so wouldn't it make more sense if it was themed around Walt Disney's office or something of that era? It's sort of just another Disney space with vintage Disney artwork. But regardless of that, it was a really fantastic space and fittingly had the best food yet. The tricolor tortellini was superb, as were the corn chowder and the tortiglione pasta. It also had the best cruise ship main dining room filet mignon I've ever had, and that's pretty high praise for a cruise ship. Of course, these aren't the only dining options on board. The ship's buffet is now called Marceline Market, which is just a gentrified cabanas on the ship. First, the pros. Hand washing station was a big plus, and the seating around was mostly comfortable and aesthetically pleasing. Now, their new system of doing things is obviously influenced by the pandemic, as now it's not really a self-serve buffet anymore. You walk up to the stations, tell the employees what you want, and they'll start a new plate for you and pick out your food. Whenever you go to a new station and you want additional food, you have to hand your plate over top the counter, and they'll take it, put the food on, and then hand it back to you. This really bottlenecks people, as we witnessed several passengers, including ourselves honestly, have a hard time getting exactly what we wanted, and hearing each other through the masks in this loud environment just made the whole thing a bit of a chaotic mess. Because it's being done this way, you're discouraged from trying out new food, and this will sound stupid, but managing the food and portions on your plate. Overall, it felt as though there were less options to choose from than the previous ships, and you had to do more walking, which in this often packed, tight environment made this pretty stressful. Look, I totally understand why it's being done this way, as Disney wants to keep a clean pandemic procedure in place. At least that would make sense if it weren't for random sections of the buffet, like the shrimp, being completely self-serve. So what's the point of that then? The food was honestly just okay, and we found that some of the previous food options on the other ships were now just completely gone. Some options were actually very good, and some ranged from decent to not very good. To make matters worse, it's only open for breakfast and lunch during a select few hours. The rest of the time, it's completely sealed off, which can cause some confusion. That also means, unlike the other ships, it does not serve a casual alternative to the main dining. So if you really don't want to indulge yourself in Marvel or Frozen, you're out of luck for food. Well, that is apart from the on-deck quick service option. Disney Wish has greatly expanded their on-deck offerings in a way that thankfully almost overshadows the very meh Marceline Market. These booths serve up flavors for Mexican, barbecue, pizza, burgers, and ice cream, all completely complimentary. The tacos from Donald's Cantina were very good, and the Mickey's Smokestack Barbecue provided some genuinely great meat, along with the best mac and cheese at sea. It was extremely good for a
Ooh,
free quick
yes.
service option. So good, in fact, that we didn't even
Ooh,
bother with
I
the buffet the
love
last
it.
2
I
afternoons.
love it.
Since we're on deck, let's talk about what it's like up here. This actually might be the best addition to the ship, as there's now 8 family pools on board. That's quite the step up from the 3 on the Fantasy. Now, to be fair, not all of these are actually swimming pools. Some are just 1 foot deep and whatnot. But the new tiered design giving sight lines forward is a great idea and spreads people out instead of all condensing them into one small pool. It's genuinely a brilliant design that works great. Unfortunately, however, I cannot say the same for their marquee slide, which dominates the deck. Disney calls this the Aquamos and claims it's the world's first attraction at sea.
That is the first ever Disney attraction at sea. Just like we do in our theme parks, we've created a rich storyline for the Aquamouse, complete with show scenes, lighting, special effects, and even a few surprises.
Basically, you travel up a long conveyor belt through an enclosed steel tube. Around you are scenes from Mickey cartoons with water jets that'll abruptly nail you in the face. Once at the top, you're thrusted onto a very fun water coaster section and blasted through the only clear portion of the slide, which is cantilevered over the ship, and then it's over. I certainly understand what they were going for here, but it all feels a bit off and honestly very underwhelming. I don't know if I'd call watching 8 screens as I go up a steel tube thematic elements worthy of calling
like
it an
it.
attraction.
I like
Really, what even is the theme here? This is an industrial looking conveyor belt with RGB lighting around you. I don't really feel like I'm in a cartoon world, and really the entire slide doesn't have anything to do with what's going on in the actual screen portion. The whole experience is around 1 minute and 50 seconds, but you're only actually on the slide portion for about 25 seconds. It's all very strange because you're being propelled up this large structure high above the ship and the ocean, yet only a tiny fraction of the slide is actually clear for you to take in the views. In the CGI mock-up of the ship and marketing material, it seemed as though there were multiple show scenes and other large sections were just pure glass, but that just isn't the case in reality. In fact, you're only in that clear portion for about 6 seconds, so you really aren't able to take in any views actually. This is in stark contrast where nearly the entire slide on the Dream and Fantasy is clear to see out of. I much prefer those iterations, as the Aquamos is fun for what it is, but I think it severely underdelivers and really just creates an eyesore for the entire ship. Speaking of which, the entire exterior of the ship is more or less inheriting the design of the past 2 vessels, yet changing some minor things here or there. If you're someone who's quite familiar of the exterior of the previous ships, then the differences will probably stand out more. First and probably most obvious is the fact that the Wish has now 2 bulges on its balcony superstructures for each side. No idea why they did this other than maybe to provide some more interesting views. Our room was on one of the aft curves and it made our balcony slightly larger, which I think is a huge plus. There's now another deck forward for those extra concierge rooms, and obviously a massive white tube climbing into the sky. Finally, they got rid of the sections of glass which wrapped around Deck 11. It was a design cue that was inherited from the original ships and adapted for the Dream and Fantasy. It was very uniform, and I think it personally set the ships apart. Now for the Wish, it's just a generic long wall of glass like you'd find on any other ship. It definitely detracts from the overall look, but then again, why is there a castle inside a 1940s style ship? While we're still on deck, I have to praise the pirate party. It was fantastic and leaps better than what's on the older ships. It gets straight into the show with a really fun band, good music, and tons of energy. You can clearly see that the crowd is much more into this than the older ships, and it's all topped off with the only fireworks show at sea. A genuinely impressive one at that. The only downside was that there was no longer a late night pirate buffet, which is a bit of a cheapo. Elsewhere for entertainment, there's the Walt Disney Theater, which is the main 2-story stage theater that hosts Broadway-style shows. I've been to many of them in the past, and they're not for me, but no doubt they're fun for families and very well produced. Instead of one large cinema like on most ships, including the old Disney ones, there are now 2 smaller cinemas that play first-run Disney films, even pictures that are still in theaters, all for free. The one Alice in Wonderland theater in particular was literally Brennan's favorite part of the ship. There's also the 2-story Luna Lounge, which serves as the multi-purpose entertainment space for events like bingo and game shows. Next to that is the completely unthemed, totally generic space of Triton Lounge, which when I heard that name, I thought it was going to be something like Pub 687 on the Disney Dream, which celebrates the engineering and construction of that ship. Since Triton is the code name of the new class of ships, I figured that was the direction they were going to, but no. If anything, it was themed as if it were in one of the common spaces in the older ships. Anyways, there's also the Hero Zone, which is an indoor sports complex that can host an inflatable obstacle course, which honestly looks pretty fun. In the same vein, there's also the kids areas of the Oceaneers Club, which just look as cool as ever. There's even a slide that will take you right to them from the lobby, and the spaces within look super fun. The teens area is definitely a bit of a downgrade space-wise, but also who cares? No cruise ship in history will ever get a teen space right. Now, just outside of that area is one of the few adult-only sections of the ship, and I've saved it until now because they've absolutely dropped the ball on this, and I really don't like it. I'll start with the good, and that's the new specialty restaurants on board, Paulo Steakhouse and Enchanté. Both are rather inoffensive.
Comment down below. Are you guys enjoying this Disney Wish review? And are you going to take your next trip and your next cruise on Disney Wish? Comment below.
And while we didn't get the chance to dine in either, I've heard good things about the service and food there. Connecting both of them is the Rose, which replaces one of my favorite bars on the Fantasy called Meridian. The Rose is just fine and is really only there for pre- and post-dinner drinks. Now, unlike the previous 4 Disney ships, there isn't a district for bars and lounges for adults. Instead, they've opted to dot them around the ship, sort of concentrated around the Deck 3 forward area. But it's by no means an adult-only section, as this is one of the main thoroughfares for all guests going to shows and shopping. Nightingale's was probably the most closed off out of all of them, and was a relaxing bar to sit and listen to piano music. It also had clever and really subtle theming. The Keg and Compass was comfortable with nice craftsmanship, yet too bright on a late evening. Also, the drinks ranged from good to not very good at all, actually. The bayou was the most beautiful out of all of them, but it was open on either side, allowing for occasional noise into the space. Some like it that way, but at night, when everything is closed around it, it sort of just feels like a dead mall. While some of these spaces were great individually, I really missed the district concept on the other ships, as the only other interior bars on the Wish are based around the lobby and feel more like they were shoehorned there than anything. They're sort of just in the middle of hallways and don't really feel like a comfortable place to sit down and get a drink. Lastly, there's the Star Wars Hyperspace Lounge, which was one of the ship's most heavily promoted bars. This was another huge letdown, as the space felt small and honestly not all that well themed. Now, I understand this is supposed to be a luxury space yacht or whatever, but the walls just look very bare and everything around it had this plasticky look to it. The only truly obvious indicator that you're in a Star Wars space is the large screen acting as the window, which is cool, especially paired with the sound design. This bar is effectively replacing the Skyline Lounge, which was found on the previous 2 ships, and had a very similar concept where you were looking off into ambient, far-off places. But as generic as some might call that bar, you're almost more immersed in that space, as it really sells the fact that you're in a sophisticated, high-rise Manhattan-style bar. But here, the space feels more like a gimmick than anything else. And what's annoying is that Disney has already made really great-looking Star Wars bars before. In fact, there's actually a really good Star Wars space on board in the Oceaneers Club for kids. This just totally missed the mark for me, and I really don't get the appeal, especially for the prices you pay. But that's another thing I'll come back to later. Senses Spa, and more specifically the Rainforest Room on the Disney Fantasy, is genuinely one of my favorite parts about the ship. It has fantastic hot tubs that overlook the ocean, a sauna with floor-to-ceiling windows, and special aromatherapy showers. Unfortunately, they've mostly screwed up this space as well. Instead of being on Deck 11 like the older ships, it's now on Deck 5. This means those sweeping ocean views are now replaced with views of the upper promenade deck. For starters, the gym is certainly a downgrade, but it is cool that they have a room just for a spin class. We ended up paying for the Rainforest Room, which gives you access to the main spa and all the facilities within. The price for the 3 of us was $279 for just 1 day of use. It doesn't really feel any larger than the previous ships, but the decorations of foliage are much nicer. The new swinging benches in the middle are nice, but unfortunately they got rid of the aromatherapy showers, so it really isn't the rainforest room anymore. Now they're just regular showers with fancy nozzles, but also like in the middle of everything, so if you do use them, you're sort of just showering awkwardly in the open. Not to mention the ceramic heated beds are also in the same room right next to them. See, on the Fantasy, those beds were in their own quiet area, which also looks onto the ocean, so you won't be disrupted if you're trying to take a nap or read a book. Here, they're just, oh yeah.
Bringing in a new roommate to save money, is that the plan?
But we gotta find some way to save, so say hi to Glenn from work. Hey.
In the middle of everything. You also have access to 3 saunas, a dry, humid, and cold one, which I thought was actually really nice. Now, the real big change here is the outside deck, which is actually embedded in the hull of the ship. This is pretty sweet, and there's no denying that the area is huge. There are still 2 hot tubs to enjoy, which is nice, but again, no ocean views. The hanging beds are also a very lovely addition, but because the promenade wraps around the bow, it means that people can just peer down into the space, which sort of takes away the privacy you gain. While the rainforest room probably gains square footage from the older ships, it somehow feels like something was lost in comparison to the Fantasy, which honestly seems to be a reoccurring theme for the ship. For the price you pay to gain access here, I'm not really sure if it's worth it. Not to mention the complete downgrade from the old couple's massage room to this new windowless prison. Finally, there's the adult sun deck on deck 13, and it's clear that this was a total afterthought. It's kind of hard to believe that it wasn't because the lack of planning here is shocking. So instead of being in the forward section of the ship, everyone 18 and up gets almost the entire deck space aft of the second funnel. That means it's a skinny deck on either side and a very small section of space at the very back, since that's where the pool had to go. The pool itself is actually really great. It's a very luxurious infinity pool that has great aft looking views. The only issue is, as you probably guessed, is that it gets absolutely packed here. Even the stupid wet chair things flanking either side of the main pool are forced to be used when there's just too many people in the main pool. The Cove Cafe is fortunately back, but much smaller than before, and now with no snacks. It also can't be accessed from the inside, meaning if you want your specialty coffee, then you'll need to walk all the way around the outdoor deck to get to it, which sounds fine until there's a torrential downpour. Now, there is a second level which provides more seating, but it's all a smoking area, so it's not the most comfortable environment. But the poor planning gets even worse, as once you round the corner to the port side sun deck, it just dead ends. But the last little bit of seating area is so close to the entrance of the Aquamouse that you'll just hear this on loop while you try to relax. But it doesn't end there, as the Disney Wish only has 1 public hot tub on board, and it's in this area. But it too has noise pollution problems, as it's fitted right up against the ending of the slide. So if you're lucky enough to find a space in that hot tub and you're glad you got away from the never-ending goofy hell, you'll now just be hearing Mickey and Minnie on it. The adult area does technically extend out near the family decks, so that's a more obvious noise pollution issue, especially from the close-by funnel screen. But what I didn't expect was for there to be water spraying from the slide all over the seating area. Now, I know some people are going to say, Jake, you're complaining about the adult area on a Disney cruise. I mean, yeah, sure, but that's what I've loved about these ships for so long. The fact that you can enjoy the fun spaces of the ship, but when you want to, you have the option to retreat into a very luxurious setting, at least on the last 4 ships. Here you have little options. And it's hard to believe that these issues weren't obvious to the designers when this was being built. But this is sort of a common theme aboard this ship. Of course, other than enchantment. It's the weird design decisions they made to make this entire ship feel so confusing to navigate. I mean, I obviously take interest in ships, and I feel like I can find my way around a space quite well, but all 3 of us often struggle to orient ourselves and figure out how to get to certain places. For instance, we got lunch at the barbecue place on deck 11 and wanted to bring it up to the adult area to eat. Since I have a busted leg right now, I didn't want to carry the tray up 5 different staircases, yes, that's the actual number, to get there. So we walked to the aft elevator lobby and took the elevator up 1 level. But because only 2 of the 8 elevators in that bay are able to reach the adult area on deck 13, we had to get off the elevator and try again. At this point, I just said, let's just take the main stairs. Then realized the aft staircase stopped at deck 11. So you'll have to wait for 2 of the 8 elevators and pretty much play Russian roulette on which is going to allow you to reach deck 13. Once you're there, by the way, there's no way back down using the stairs unless you go outside. That'll be especially difficult if you have accessibility issues, which I can only imagine what a nightmare that would be if you had a wheelchair. But okay, let's say you're going to go to one of the specialty dining rooms. Well, if you don't want to wait for the elevators, you'll have to walk up the aft staircase until you reach the dead end on deck 11. Then you have to walk down the hallway to Marceline Market until you see this inexplicable razor-themed staircase. That'll lead you up to the gray hallway in which you'll find the world's most unassuming doors for the luxury adult dining venues. Designers also eliminated one of the elevator bays, giving the ship just 2 central staircases and elevators instead of 3. But it actually has more elevators overall than the previous ships. I don't know why it is then that the wait time for the elevators feels so much longer. It might be because more people tend to congregate around these areas, or maybe it's the horrible elevator buttons. So the elevators on board the Wish are smart. They have proximity sensors so that you can press the buttons without actually making contact. That's great, except they're not smart at all. I lied. They're actually really dumb. Mainly because when you pack a small elevator on a cruise ship, like every ship, people are squeezed to the side. So every single time someone stands too close to the button.
I can't believe he's talking about the elevator buttons. Hey, but this is his honest review about Disney Wish. So, shout out to him.
And literally half of them will be pressed. So that'll make your elevator journey much longer. But let's say you do make it out of your 18-hour elevator journey and want to catch some air on Disney's classic promenade deck. Well, good luck finding it. Most ships, including this one in very select areas, have clearly marked doors that look like this. This one, for instance, is by Senza Spa. But for some reason, most of the doors on deck 4 look like this. When we were leaving on day 1, I was trying to figure out how to get out there so we could watch the ship sail away. So I asked an employee and they directed me to this door, and I was so confused on how anyone was supposed to know that. This does not look like a door that A, leads you to the deck, or B, is for public use. To make matters more confusing, there's also directional signs that point to the promenade doors that say cast members only. I don't know, but we're not done yet. Once you're out on the promenade, you get to enjoy the nice lounge chairs and the interesting new deck. Disney actually eliminated all the cabins on deck 5 and made the outdoor space, which was originally balconies, into a promenade deck. This will also lead you up to the bow of the ship, which I can't deny is really cool, especially since you get to walk right up to the very front. Although that does mean you can get awkwardly close to these portholes, which doesn't make them exactly private. If you're a runner and like to run on board ships, this may be an issue for you now, as you have to climb several stairs if you want to circumvent the ship. Which you can't actually, by the way. Yeah, for some reason the aft portion of the promenade is blocked off to guests, so you can't actually make a full revolution around the deck. Also, if you walk fully forward and don't take the stairs up to the bow, you'll reach some unmarked, unlocked doors that will for some reason take you into Senza Spa. I'm pretty sure you're not supposed to be able to do this. Back inside, there's also a random sign that just says Disney Studio, then there's nothing there. I have no idea what the space is, and it doesn't show up on the deck plans, so this sign is a bit of a mystery. I just feel like overall there could have been much better uses of space, especially if they used these new elements to their advantage. Like, what if they used this widened upper promenade deck for something like Norwegian has on their breakaway class with their boardwalk style outdoor seating? That would be awesome if bars lined that space and had a slight outdoor seating area. The same goes for this new panoramic glass window at the aft of the ship. It might as well not even be there for the percentage it's actually being used. It would have made a great observation lounge or flex space like Royal Caribbean and Celebrity does on their ships. Now, I understand certain things have to be certain places, and I won't pretend like I'm in any authority to preach naval architecture. But from an outsider's perspective, it all feels so disjointed and not well thought out. Certainly not as refined as the previous ships in the fleet. And that's probably because this whole ship was essentially designed by people outside of the industry at large. In fact, the Disney portfolio executive who led the Disney Wish team had never been on a cruise ship before.
Well, first of all, I never had even been on a cruise ship when I started this project. Am I allowed to say that? Yes.
While that may be a bit of a red flag, I'm by no way saying that these people don't know what they're doing. There's so many details on board that really align with what makes classic Disney Imagineering so special. But it also has many of the modern Disney influences. And if you've ever attempted to go to any physical Disney property in the last few years, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. On top of that, you'll also know that it's a lot more expensive and features many more new ways for people to indulge in the company. It's no secret that Disney has been catering to high-end guests for a while now. In fact, focusing heavily on them. It's why they just introduced a $110,000 a person private jet adventure, and it's why they doubled the amount of concierge cabins on board the ship. They just make more money, so from a business standpoint, it makes more sense to prioritize space for them. It's also why there's a $250 drink at the Star Wars bar. Oh, also there's a drink on the menu that costs $5,000. Yeah. Apparently, the drink is made from several high-end shots and also allows you to take home some silver-plated shot glasses, a bottle of champagne from Skywalker Ranch, and vouchers for 4 people to visit the ranch. So if that's worth $5,000 to you, then there you go. Shopping on board also follows suit, as it's extremely upscale. In the jewelry store on board, they for some reason trusted us to try on this necklace for the price of, well... Wow. Sorry, AJ, repeat the price one more time for me.
The price tag was $4 million.
$4 million.
While we're on the topic of money, let's discuss the pricing for the ship itself, starting with our voyage. We originally booked a June sailing, but the ship was actually delayed and our sailing was canceled. We were given 50% off a future cruise, which I used for something else, and we hastily rebooked the closest sailing we could find to the maiden voyage. So we definitely paid an inflated price, which for the 3 adults in the lowest category balcony stateroom was $3,646 USD, which for me as a Canadian, that's about $4,600, and that's not including extras like drinks and the spa. Cheapest pricing for just 2 adults on the Wish is around $1,800 for a 3-night cruise. That's pretty expensive, especially when you look at the competition. You can find a Royal Caribbean 4-night cruise for $750 for 2 people on a good ship. So Disney is pricing themselves as a very premium cruise product for families. Now, some of that is justified since you are getting world-class kid facilities, free soda and juices, free room service, larger staterooms, Disney entertainment, and a private island, Castaway Cay, which is fantastic. You're also allowed to bring 2 bottles of wine per adult or a case of beer, which in the industry is pretty rare. Remember though, that $1,800 for 2 people is just for an inside cabin. A porthole can be as low as $1,900 and a veranda around $2,100. Those prices are nearly rock bottom and are really only available for off-season or well in advance. Concierge is a step up from all of that, and it really makes no sense to me, as prices start at $4,600 for 2 people, and that's the lowest category without a balcony. Those 2-story princess suites start at around $18,000, with the Wish Tower suite coming in at an eye-watering $21,600 for 2 people for a 3-night cruise. Even if you had the money ready to spend on a vacation, why on earth would you choose this? Sure, you can spend 3 nights on a Disney cruise to NASA where everyone can peer into your room, or you can fly round trip in business class from New York to Bali for 2 people and stay for 14 nights in a 1-bedroom duplex suite at the 4 Seasons Sion. For almost the same price, you can do an Adventures by Disney expedition cruise to Antarctica. Anyways, is the Disney Wish worth your money? Well, for us, I think it was fun to try out something new with Disney Cruise Line. It's been a ship which has been anticipated for years, and it was fun seeing what's new. For my $3,600, no. It wasn't worth the money for a 3-night cruise. Honestly, now that I read that back, I'm really second-guessing my sanity for spending that much. I typically spend that amount for a really nice balcony room for a 7-night voyage on the Fantasy, which I'm really missing right about now. I think if you can snag an inside or an ocean view cabin for under $2,000, you'll be pretty satisfied at the end of a 3 or especially 4-night cruise. That's especially true if you have younger children. But if you're a family that has the whole unit, children, teens, adults, or if you're all skewing a bit older, I think the Disney Dream or the Fantasy might be a better bet. If you have the money, I'd even try out the older ships on more unique itineraries. They're even sending the Disney Dream to Northern Europe, which I think would be a really cool vacation. To wrap this very long review up, I appreciate what Disney tried to do for this ship. They set out to build something new and different from the rest of the fleets. They certainly did that, but unfortunately it suffers from all the modern issues of Disney design work. To me, it feels like the Riviera Resort at sea, and it's missing that classic architecture that made Disney so unique and special. I mean, I could appreciate the minor details here and there, but mixing all of these IPs together, along with really confusing design choices, just make the whole experience a bit of a mess. It certainly does not feel as cohesive as before. The cruise just never felt very comforting or welcoming to me. It feels as though it's been catered far more to kids than the rest of the family, mainly for adults, where I think they really missed the mark. It all feels like a downgrade from the previous ships, which is definitely not something that should be happening here. Almost every space on board the Wish, I think, was done better on the older ships. And that worries me because this is the first of a new class of ships, and I hope these issues are corrected in the future. I think the Disney Wish has a lot of great spaces, but when put together, it just doesn't work for me. And it doesn't even make you feel like you're on a tropical cruise. And for all of those reasons, I don't think I'll ever be back aboard. But what do you think? This, of course, is all my opinion, and I'm also very biased.
And that is today's video. I'm going to end it early right here. I really enjoyed this review and this Disney Wish ship. And I know I'll take my vacation on this Disney Wish. Comment below. Are you going to take a vacation on a Disney Wish or not? Or are you just going to find a cheaper option? All right. Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.